Fleetwood Mac existed for nearly a decade prior to the release of Fleetwood Mac in 1975, but not in a manner that modern audiences would recognize. The story of how Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks transformed the British blues band anchored by drummer Mick Fleetwood and bassist John McVie is well and often told in countless documentaries, retrospectives, and such reissues as this new triple CD, single DVD Super Deluxe Edition. Repetition has curdled this fascinating tale, rendering Happy Accidents as the work of divine providence, but by adding a disc of rough alternate takes along with a disc of live material, this Super Deluxe Edition helps make the familiar seem fresh once again. Tired though it may be, the prehistory of Fleetwood Mac is essential to understanding the album because the record exists at the intersection of two very different rock and roll aesthetics. By the time 1975 rolled around, the Mac were survivors. Mick and John, the two constants in the band since its inception through today, had the luck to work two troubled guitar geniuses. Peter Green dominated the group's earliest and bluesiest records, eventually succumbing to LSD right around the time his cohort Jeremy Spencer abandoned music for a religious cult. Neither departure was clean, but guitarist Danny Kirwan acted as a bonding agent for the band until they found Bob Welch, a rocker with a sentimental streak who seemed content to linger in the amorphous space separating AOR rock and adult contemporary pop. If all this turnover wasn't confusing enough, the band had to combat an imposter Fleetwood Mac assembled by their former manager. All these names have wound up as footnotes to Fleetwood Mac history because Mick Fleetwood happened to fall for a demo from the unknown soul singer-songwriters Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. If producer Keith Olsen, who helmed Buckingham Nicks' self-titled 1973 album, never played Mick that tape, odds are good Fleetwood Mac would have wound up hiring some other hotshot blues guitarist. Instead, Fleetwood wound up finding something he'd later call IT within Buckingham Nicks, a folk rock duo whose music shared almost no similarities to the albums Fleetwood Mac made prior to 1975. The one possible musical connection between the two groups was the melodicism of Christine McVie, a singer-songwriter who played piano with a blues combo Chicken S prior to her marriage to John. Once they were bride and groom, Christine officially joined the band in 1971, contributing appealingly soft and hooky counterpoints to the spacey rock of Kirwan and Welch. Nevertheless, there was no clear analogue in the Fleetwood Mac discography to the dreamy folk of Nicks and the barbed pop perfectionism of Buckingham, sounds that were as distinctly American as Fleetwood Mac's blues jams were British. Buckingham Nicks were also survivors of languishing in musical limbo the West Coast, but were not quite naive upstarts when they accepted Fleetwood's offer to join Fleetwood Mac. They had been playing the same game for just as long as the Mac, only in a different league. That's why the 1975 album called Fleetwood Mac, the group's second album to be named after the band, according to David Wild's liner notes in the 2018 Super Deluxe Edition, fans apparently distinguish it from its predecessor by calling it the White Album, but it's hard to imagine there are many listeners who bother with such a distinction. Feels like a debut. The unexpected intersection of two parallel spheres offers something genuinely new. Listening to Fleetwood Mac now, decades after it turned the group into superstars, it still seems fresh, unlike any other of its 1975 peers, and that's all due to how the band merged to aesthetics. Fleetwood Mac, especially in the years following Peter Green's departure, were something of a mood band, achieving a hazy, spacious vibe that lacked definition. Buckingham Nicks were their counterparts, focused not just on the precision of songs but also productions. Their 1973 album captures nascent versions of the two singer-songwriters, where Nick's delicateness is balanced by Buckingham's manic perfectionism. Buckingham did attempt to get Fleetwood Mac to march to his beat. Legend has it he was attempting to tell John how to play a part until the bassist put the hammer down, telling Buckingham that the band was named after him, but wound up settling for compromise, assisting Nicks and Christine in deepening their compositions, while his band gave soul and elasticity to his tightly wound songs. Such synthesis is the appeal of Fleetwood Mac, in part because it's assembled from so many lingering ideals from the 60s, hippie mysticism, pop practicalism, by piling on alternate takes, single edits, and live material, the Super Deluxe Edition underscores how Fleetwood Mac worked at achieving this fusion. Maybe the early versions are rough, but they feel kinetic because the band is figuring out just who they were. Even better is the live material, where the band navigates the distance between their early blues roots and newly discovered immaculate pop. Because he plays lead guitar and sings, Buckingham winds up dominating. But the wonderful thing about these versions of Oh Well and The Green Manalishi, with a two-pronged crown, is that they're blues tunes fronted by a musician whose instincts pushes him in the opposite direction of the blues, which gives these performances a thrilling energy. Even if the bonus material is worthwhile, the music that remains marvelous is the proper album. Perhaps its origins are in leftovers. Many of the songs were originally intended for a planned second Buckingham Nicks album. Crystal is revived from the first. The brilliant power pop of Blue Letter is taken from the unheralded Curtis Brothers, but the Fleetwood Mac feels unified because this album is an album of convergence. Every element of the album teems with boundless possibilities, so much of which could be found in the absolutely bewitching Nicks-helmed Rhiannon, which is why Fleetwood Mac seems thrillingly alive and resonant longer after it has been absorbed into our collective consciousness.